Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Al-Fanar Media Talks. I am Mohamed El-Hawary, Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of Al-Fanar Media. Tonight, we focus on theme that is deeply relevant to higher education, governance, and social development in the Arab world. Social capital, its role, its challenges, and its potential. In the Arab world, higher education institutions are not only sites of teaching and research, they are also hubs for building trust, networks, and collaboration. But how do we measure social capital in our societies? What role does it play in governance, education, and women's empowerment? And how can it be leveraged to face the challenges of brain drain, inequality, and conflict? Let me first introduce my speakers and guests today. Professor Dame Heather McGregor, Provost and Vice Principal of Heriot-Watt University, Dubai, a global thought leader and education leadership and social mobility. Dr. Sherifa Fouad Sherif, Executive Director of the National Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development, Professor of Public Administration at Cairo University, and a member of the UN Committee of Experts on Public Administration, a distinguished expert in governance, sustainability, and women leadership. Welcome in this panel. Please let me start with Professor Dame Heather McGregor. How do you see the concept of social capital shaping the future of universities in the Arab world, particularly in fostering collaboration, research networks, and social mobility?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today on this webinar. I do think we have a responsibility, those of us who live and who lead institutions of education in the Arab world, to encourage people, and particularly academics, and actually I would specifically say early career academics, to build a social capital. So what does that mean? It means that the value of the relationships that you build, and I think this will support and help people. You know, it's quite a lonely place being an academic. You are, if you're interested in research, you aren't always necessarily amongst a large community who are interested in your particular research in your own university. By definition, a PhD means that you'll probably be an expert on your subject in that PhD at the time you graduate, probably more of an expert in your area than everybody else around you because you've chosen that area. So the best way to build a community is to build outside of your university, and indeed even outside of your region, to build connections and build what we call social capital. I prefer the term social capital to connections or relationships, because connections or relationships sounds a bit soft sometimes, and I don't think people think of it as a real asset or as a scientific asset. But actually, there is strong academic literature behind this that shows that if you build relationships, they will support and help you. They have been shown in the literature to help people to progress their careers, to develop new knowledge. These are all things that academics need to do. So I think that we, as I said, as leaders, I think we have a responsibility to help universities in the Arab world to build relationships with universities in the non-Arab world. And that's not institution to institution, Mohammed. That's people to people. And that's what we're talking about here.
Thank you so much for these insights, because it's very important that to understand what is actually the social capital meaning, and the catalysts that will do a lot of work towards supporting this important assets in our Arab societies and even globally. It's very important to all of us. My next question would be to Professor Sherifa. From a governance and public policy perspective, how does social capital influence institutional trust in Arab societies, and what is the role of universities in strengthening this trust?
Great. Thank you for a great question, Mohammed. Capitalizing on what Professor said, we're talking about creating communities. And of course, with communities comes trust. And building trust is very difficult in the Arab region. According to the Arab Barometer for 2024, many of the Arab region countries lack the trust in one another and accordingly, the trust in government and trust in institutions. So when we talk about governance, we're talking basically about mainly accountability and transparency, among other things, of course, rule of law, efficiency, effectiveness, and so forth. But let me just focus on transparency and accountability. Universities are safe spaces. They're areas where youth are create, again, communities, as Professor said. We're talking about a community, a circle of a trust, and building trust is very important. How do we do so when we want to build integrity, accountability, and transparency within our youth? There are several ways we can do that. Of course, building universities that is very transparent through data sharing, through knowledge sharing with students, through student representation on the different committees and boards. This is very important to listen to the voices of our students. So practical steps, talking about, for example, another example would be publishing annual reports. Sustainability reporting in universities are very important. Hosting citizen academic panels, talking about civic engagement with the different stakeholders around our community in different universities. So there we have in governance, talking on in the governments or through a governance lens, we have several tools that we could use to enhance trust, to create more trust and build trust within our communities, within universities in the Arab world. Thank you. I hope I answered your
Thank thank you so much. It's really important what you mentioned, and actually, I believe myself that when it comes to trust, it's all about universities. It's like think tanks. It's like representing the whole community and the challenges and the opportunities to all of our communities. And this will lead me to another question to Professor Heather, which is from your perspective, leading an international university in Dubai, how can Arab universities leverage social capital to better integrate into global higher education system and rankings?
What's interesting about rankings, because again, rankings are driven by data. Okay. And you would think then that it's not being driven by relationships, and your social capital is your relationships. But actually, one of the things that rankings look at, all rankings, is to what extent are you as a university or the people in your university? There's no such thing as a university. A university is its people, its faculty, its professional services staff, and its students, not necessarily in that order. And so that university, when rankings, are assessed, they look at the extent to which universities collaborate with other universities. And one of the things that gets you mentioned is, have you co-authored with somebody at another university? Now, co-authoring with somebody in another university, if you have enough people in your university in the Arab region who are collaborating with non-Arab region universities to publish, that will get you up the rankings. So this quite simple means build the relationships with people in your subject area or in adjacent areas that are not in your region, and this will contribute to the rankings. Also, the more relationships you build, the more people will talk about you to their students and to their own researchers, and the more you will be cited. And again, citations are another measure that are used in the QS rankings. Another measure, 20% of the QS rankings is reputation. And every university is allowed to submit every year several hundred names to the QS rankings. And then the QS write out those names and ask for your opinion of the University of Cairo or the American University of Cairo or whatever. But in order for the universities to give your name to the QS to get the questionnaire sent to you, they have to have your permission. And somebody has to write to you and get your permission and say, would you be prepared to be written to by QS on our behalf? These are things you can only do if you've built a relationship with somebody to write and ask to give their name to the rankings. So it needs relationships. Relationships become a strategic asset. Relationships are a strategic asset. Now, also, trust lowers transaction costs. Professor Sherifa was just talking about the importance of building trust, and she gave a great example of bringing together university leaders with student leaders. And every university does this. But if you bring them together and they spend enough time together, they learn to trust each other, and trust lowers transaction costs. People have won Nobel Prizes for that, about showing that trust lowers transaction costs. So if I trust you, I will accept your invitation to do a webinar very quickly. If I've never heard of you and therefore I don't trust you, I will be looking up Al-Fanar Media, doing some due diligence, wondering who's watching you, spending time, which is money, investigating you before I will agree to say yes. So if I trust you, I'll say yes straight away. And that's a great relationship to have in governance. Boards of directors work best when they trust each other in terms of governance, but they build that trust through building relationships. So those relationships, they are a strategic asset, and they will help you climb the QS rankings.
Thank you a lot for these insights. And we in Al-Fanar Media, we have also a strategic partnership with QS rankings, and we are working with them maybe for more than 3 years now. My next question would be to Professor Sherifa. You serve on both universities, in both national and international governance bodies. What lessons can Arab higher education learn from global governance models to enhance collaboration and accountability?
Another great question, Mohamed. It's very, I think I want to answer this question by focusing on different tools again to transform our Arab universities. First of all, talking about independent auditing, which is very important. Again, I'm talking through a governance lens. So independent auditing is very important. Inviting external auditors on our committees to audit what we're doing is of extreme importance. Again, this is one of the tools that definitely builds trust internally and externally among our universities in the Arab region. Reviewing budgets and procurements and looking at the ratio between student and professor ratios are very important, of course, and also the Arab region, and especially in the public universities. Putting KPIs, key performance indicators, and being able to measure these KPIs, and again, linking it to, of course, when we talk about sustainability reporting for universities is very important. And linking the KPIs with the Sustainable Development Goals is very important, because the role of universities in implementation and acceleration of the SDGs is perfect for accelerating again where we stand today. Of course, we're almost there. It's almost 2030. So 2030 is like tomorrow. So, and we're still talking about implementation and acceleration. And I think universities in the Arab region must and do play a very very important role. Talking about open data portals, similar to the college scorecards, publishing, again, co-publishing with different universities and different professors, and collaborating with different universities. International accreditation is very important, again. So the idea of collaboration, the idea of tripartite collaboration with different entities, different universities around the world, sharing knowledge, and be able to, all this creates trust and builds trust in our universities across the Arab region. So, And again, building trust is very difficult. It's very hard, and to sustain it is even harder.
Thank you so much. And it's very important to highlight that most of our global risks and maybe global challenges, it's like the same everywhere. So it needs this kind of collaboration. It needs this kind of sharing knowledge and expertise to get some kind of opportunities to face these global challenges and global risks. I thank you very much for these insights. My next question is to Professor Ethan, which is many Arab students study abroad, but often do not return. How can universities in the region retain talent and build trust networks that encourages graduates to contribute locally?
Well, I think, we're very privileged to have Professor Sherifa on this call, who, of course, is a great example of somebody who went to do her PhD overseas and came back eventually to be on a faculty, of one of your greatest universities in Egypt. And I know, Professor Sherifa, you did your PhD at Sussex, didn't you? Which is where where my eldest son did his degree. And it's an amazing university for international relations and politics and public administration and so on. And so I know it's it's great that you studied in the UK and did that, but you did come back to work and that's I think that's what we want ultimately, is for people to always feel connected to the universities back in the region and to come back and raise the standard and keep investing in the region. Now, one way to do that, and Professor Sherifa mentioned it, is you get a lot of credibility by getting external people, external to your own university, to come in to do audits, but also lots of smaller things than that. For instance, we would never appoint a professor, either a promotion internally or from outside, except for, and I'm sure this is true at the University of Cairo, you need an external person to be sitting on the panel to make that appointment. And that gives the university credibility and trust. There's trust there that we haven't just appointed our friends or promoted our friends or whatever, that they've been assessed by a proper panel that included people external. Now, you don't actually earn any money for sitting on an external appointment panel. You get other professors from around the world to do it as a citizenship activity. And another place that you where you would use external academics for credibility is on PhD vivas. So when your PhD student gets to a certain stage, you need an external examiner, and you need to ring somebody in your own area, but in another university in a different part of the world, and ask them if they will be an external examiner. We do pay people for that, but I think honestly, it's like $100 US. I mean, they're not getting rich on this, and they have to read an entire PhD and then conduct an examination and then write notes afterwards. And if the student needs to do minor corrections, they have to oversee that. So these kind of jobs of coming to do subject matter or quality assurance, academic quality audits, or coming to do governance audits, or sitting on a PhD as an external examiner, or sitting on a panel that's an appointment panel. We academics need to ring other academics around the world to help us out all the time. And I think it would be brilliant if some of the leading Arab scholars who are sitting in the United States, in Australia, in Asia, in countries away from the Arab region, would willingly volunteer to be external examiners, appointment panel people, etc. This is the way you can build connections with the institutions of their mother country, and that way they built that relationship. And then if they do want to come home at some point, they've built a relationship already with the university who already knows them. And I think there are numerous ways that Arab citizens who have gone overseas to further their education and build an academic career in another part of the world can serve their mother country or indeed the adjacent countries in the Arab region to help them. And fill in the QS questionnaire, please.
Thank you so much for this. And actually, it's one of the most challenges that we face in the Arab world, which is brain drain and how to get this kind of connection between our scholars, Arab scholars, and their home countries. And this also leading us to another concept, which is migration from south to north. And now we are supporting this idea of migration from south to south to have this kind of similar context and backgrounds that can help to give some ideas to put ideas to invest in these countries to solve the problems, and it's all common problems in the region. Actually, I want also to ask Professor Sherifa. Women in academia and governance are essential actors in building social capital. What strategies can be adopted to increase women's participation in decision making in Arab higher education institution?
Okay, let me tackle this question by saying, first of all, saying that women remain represented in higher education in the Arab region. If you look around us by numbers, the number of provosts, the number of deans, so actually most of the women in our universities today are faculty, but they don't hold leadership positions. Especially if we talk about the gender pay gap, that's another issue for women around the world. Women usually are paid less than men, even if they're doing the same job. So, and this is according, of course, to the latest numbers for the Global Gender Gap report of 2023 and 2024. We're trying to close this gap. It's not totally closed. According to the latest numbers, also it's been closed for around 60% of its gender gap has been closed. In Egypt, we have the same problem. Around the Arab world, it's the same problem. But in government, actually, we do not have a gender pay gap, which is very interesting. But in our universities across Egypt, there is definitely a gender pay gap. So we're talking about giving, as we were talking before we started, the idea of equal opportunity. It's not about quota. It's not about numbers. It's about the right skill sets, the right upskilling and reskilling of women to be able to compete in the market. And to be able to get funding for different research, to be able to give women scholarships. I'm personally one of the people that it was an honor for me to be a Chevening Scholar. And I was able to earn my PhD from the University of Sussex. So we need more of that. We need more of scholarships for women, focusing on different areas of research that affect women around the world. So I think funding and research is very important in our area. We're talking about universities in the Arab world. Providing tenure tracks for women, or increasing the number of tenure tracks for women in universities, permanent roles in employment, of course, giving more focus on equal opportunity between men and women across all universities alike. Governments also play a role, which is very important. Our governments also have to focus and promote the idea of women in different leadership roles. Also looking at the government's role in funding research and funding scholarships for women. This is very important. So it's not only the role of the universities, it's also the responsibility of government. So I think it's very important to give women the right skill sets, the right opportunities. We don't want to go through missed opportunities for women, and focus on research funding, scholarships, and the like.
Thank you so much, because it's very important. We have this kind of we have the gender gap, we have the skills gap, we have all kinds of gaps actually in the world. So it's very important to do some kind of integration between the stakeholders, whether governments, universities, schools, whatever, NGOs, to work on this kind of skills, or the set of skills that needed to be supporting and strengthening and empowering women in these societies, and also with the AI. And so it's give us more and more challenges, and this will lead me to Professor Heather again, which I want to ask on the times of crisis, such as a conflict or economic instability. How can higher education institutions act as anchors of social trust and resilience?
Well, this is very true. I mean, we have seen even in our own region that there's a lot of instability, and that you never know when you wake up, you come home and someone's bombed somebody else, and university, the first thing you're thinking about is everybody safe. I for instance, when we had the regional crisis in June, at the very end of June, we at that point, I literally had to know it was the end of the academic year. We had people were on leave all over the place. I probably had 30% of my staff had taken leave. And I didn't know where anybody was. I didn't know if people were in countries where they'd shut the airspace. That you can remember that they shut all the airspace in Iran and Iraq and Armenia and and so on. And so I literally there was a day where I had to find out where was everyone. And I could do that very quickly, fortunately, through making sure that a group of us went out and found where everybody was and was everybody safe. But knowing that your employer cares for you, knowing that people are concerned about where you are, and also creating that a university is, whatever's going on around you, that university will continue, and that your studies will continue, and that your support will continue. I think these are very important. I have 126 nationalities of student. There are actually only about 200 countries in the world, and 126 nationalities of student would cover almost every kind. I mean, I have students from Fiji. Who would know? And it's important to provide a place where they all feel safe and they all feel that they are going to come to study and it will be worth it. But I would like to go back to what you were talking to Professor Sherifa about women and support, because if you build relationships as women, whether they are academic relationships or whatever, a female academic is by definition almost certainly going to, especially in the early stages of their career, going to have a family and be expected to support that family and be expected to teach and write and publish research. And it doesn't leave a lot of time. I mean, there's only 168 hours in the week, and that includes sleeping. So how are you going to allocate that time as a professional woman? It's really, really difficult. And if I'm going to say to you, on top of that, you need to go and build some relationships, and you need to build some social capital, and you need to pair up with academics in other areas around the world and start publishing with them and so on. It looks like an impossible task. And so one of the things I think we can all do for our female colleagues in Arab universities is to provide structured ways for them to meet other people. And then by the way, you also overlay, on top of all of those things that you're supposed to do as a professional woman, you overlay the cultural thing that you're not going to be like some women in the Western world would be out at events on their own in the evening. That's not going to happen in a lot of Arab cultures. So you need to provide structured opportunities for people to build relationships with other people so that they can meet people that they can publish with and write with and co-investigate with and go on to bids for research grants with and so on. And also you need to be able to sponsor women. If you see funding opportunities, you should know enough women to ring up and say, have you thought about applying for this grant? And so I think women need to help other women. I think, honestly, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And that, by the way, is a Madeleine Albright quote. It's not an original Heather McGregor quote. But that is very important, that those of us who have got to senior positions reach back and help the women behind us. And one way we can do that is by helping them to broker relationships. So it is so important that women continue to build social capital, and they are the people with the least amount of time to do it. So anything you as a more senior person can do to help that. One of the, as you know, we're having this very big conference at the end of March. And one of the things I want to encourage is the attendance by women from around the Arab region, because we're bringing people from Harvard and the University of Amsterdam and so on, but mainly major key scholars from the United States to the UAE. But all of them that I've invited, they've never been here before. They don't regularly go to the Arab region to present or to give keynote speeches or whatever. It's not something that happens very often, and so we're bringing them here so that people don't have to travel very far to hear from them in person and meet them in person and make those relationships. So that's really why I want to see these kind of things succeed. Not only do I want to have a conference about social capital, I want people to create social capital at the conference.
This is very important, and I knew some information about this conference, but I wanted to know more from you, Professor. What about this the topics that will be covered in this conference, and the main speakers you will invite from Harvard?
Well, the main speaker we're inviting from Harvard is somebody called Professor Robert Putnam, who so Bob Putnam. So he is someone that everybody can Google. He wrote a very famous book many years ago called Bowling Alone, about the fact that people needed to build relationships with each other, and about what happened in America when television became very widespread and people didn't go out in the evenings anymore to meet their friends and go bowling with them. And what he's more recently been publishing is about the dangers of people growing up in their bedrooms online, and people who in COVID didn't make any friends and so on, because those are the generation we need to be concerned about. People who are not building what young people today would call in real life IRL relationships. And so he is a scholar on social capital, but particularly on the dangers and the risks of isolation and lack of real friends. And we know from all the literature that people's longevity is better. Your health is better. Everything is better if you have connections with other people. We all know, that's very proved in all the literature. So he will be talking about that, and that will be one of the various themes of the conference. But relationships touch everything. It touches disaster resilience, how quickly our communities can rebuild after disaster is all about community and relationships. It touches social mobility. It touches gender mobility. If you can work your way out of poverty to a better life, you're more likely to do so if someone's helping you and you build the right relationships to help you do that. So these are all themes. We're also welcoming Professor Raj Chetty from Harvard. So Raj Chetty, I think, is probably the most cited economist in the world under the age of 45. And he's written things about social mobility and how people are able to build a better life for themselves. He is a professor he's an economist, but he's got a strong interest in a lot of the same areas actually as Professor Sherifa, in public policy and public administration. But his great specialty is how people move in social, to better lives for themselves. And he's 40 years younger than Bob Putnam, even though they're at the same university, and he's incredibly well cited. And then we have also got Professor Beata Volker, who has been head of the National Crime Institute in the Netherlands. That's another thing. people who are investigating crime or indeed defense are looking for connections and how they analyze things. So a lot of this is used in healthcare detection, in terrorism detection, in all sorts of things. So we've got a lot of great scholars coming to the UAE at the end of March, and if there's a website called Social Capital 2026.com, I think, and that will show you all the different themes. But most of all, I want it to be a place, as I said, and a time where people build their own social capital, and that everybody who comes will go away having met at least one new person that they will build a relationship with, co-publish with, support each other in their careers, and reach back and help others.
It's really important event that will take place in the UAE, and I really encourage all the scholars to submit their abstracts to the conference website. And in Al-Fanar Media, we will be covering the whole thing related to the conference, and we will give some more information about how to apply for this conference and how to submit abstracts also. Thanks for having for sharing this.
I would also mention that
insights.
that we will, and actually, Professor Sherifa, I think this is important for us. I'm sure you would believe that we are planning to provide an Arab translation on request as well for everybody, because we really want to encourage some early career scholars from the Arab world who maybe haven't had the chance to study abroad to come.
Yes, this would be definitely a great opportunity to all the Arab scholars, and it's very important topic, and also very important speakers that will give insights, I think, insights for life, not just for the social capital. And I want to ask Professor Sherifa, actually, the Arab world faces a lot of challenges, such as brain drain, as we mentioned before, the skills gaps. How can social capital be mobilized to link universities, governments, and the labor market more effectively?
Okay, as a professor, our biggest nightmare usually is bridging the gap between skills needed, or the information the student gets during his studies at the university, and the right information and skill sets he needs for the labor market. There is a gap there, and it has to be bridged. And I think this is a nightmare for any professor or any teaching faculty around the world, actually, to bridge that gap. Unemployment in the region is very high. So I think it's reached 24% or even more, and globally it's 13%. So in the Arab region, we have a very high unemployment rate. Which brings us to the idea of brain drain. Students, when they graduate, they don't find working opportunities easily. So the easiest thing to do is to look elsewhere. So this is, I think it's a responsibility not only for universities, but again, for government, for private sector, we're all in it together. All the players are alive. Working together to bridge the gap is not only the university or universities in Arab world responsibility. So usually when we think about creating, like, I don't want to call it a consortium, we could call it a tripartite partnership between private sector, government, and universities, to find different ways and to enhance the skills of students and to bridge that gap by, again, creating communication channels and social capital with different sectors, different industries. For example, if you just talked about AI, so working with companies and private sector and startups in the area of AI, and giving them that experience, or transferring that experience to students in universities, so they could find out what the skills they need to be able to join or open their own startups or whatever. So just creating that network of stakeholders talking together and around the table is very important. And of course, looking at different ways to do that. And if we're talking about knowledge networks, apprenticeship schemes, regional digital job platforms, for example, is another example that should be embedded in the Arab region. Talking about innovation and startup incubators in universities, also communicating with, again, the different successful startups in the region. Not just looking for jobs, but creating your own company is very important. So we need that linkage between government, private sector, different industries, and universities to fight the brain drain that's in the Arab world.
Thanks a lot, Professor Sherifa. And actually, my next question is for both of you, to Professor Heather and for you, Professor Sherifa. If you could propose one concrete initiative to strengthen social capital through higher education in the Arab world, what would it be?
So I would say that the opportunity the funding to travel more in person, because I don't think there's a substitute for face-to-face interaction. And I know that we live our life online. Look, we're all here online, and it's an amazing thing because it's letting lots of people participate in this who otherwise wouldn't have been able to meet Professor Sherifa and me. But 85% of communication, according to the academic literature, is non-verbal. And so, meeting people in person builds trusts, builds relationships, makes it more likely that you will help each other in adversity and crisis. And if people can't travel, if universities are universally always short of funds and funding, and research funding is a real challenge. And I would say that where there is discretionary money available, I would support early career scholars with allowing them to travel and present their work at other places and around the Arab region and then outside of it, so that they can build that social capital that will help.
Thanks a lot.
think
What do you think,
yeah.
Professor Sherifa?
My answer to that question, I think, focus on co-authoring and research around the Arab world. Again, like Professor was talking to us earlier about the peer-to-peer model that has to be out there, knowledge sharing and creating different community or connecting with different communities across the Arab world is very important for universities to thrive, to get bigger, to expand their knowledge through, again, on the personal level. So at the end of the day, if we're talking about universities, we're talking about intellectual capital. So enhancing intellectual capital through different tools and communication, face-to-face communication, not online. I favor, of course, face-to-face more, but of course, online is very important. Any mode of communication is important, but again, to communicate with peers across the Arab world and across different countries across the world globally is very important through what we do when we teach, through co-authoring, through research, through teaching, guest speakers in different areas of specialization, defending PhDs and master's degrees again. So this is a very important tool. So again, communication is the key to enhance social capital around the Arab world.
Thank you a lot, Professor Sherifa, and also thank you, Professor Heather, for these insights. Tonight's discussion highlights that social capital is not just an abstract concept. It is lived daily in our classroom, universities, and institutions, building networks and of trust, collaboration, and empowerment is essential for the Arab world's higher education and research to thrive. At the end of this fruitful discussion, I really want to thank Professor Dame Heather McGregor Provost and Vice Principal of Heriot-Watt University, Dubai. Thanks a lot for being with us today. And also, I want to thank Professor Sherifa Fouad Sherif, Executive Director of the National Institute for Government and Sustainable Development, Professor of Public Administration at Cairo University. Thanks a lot for being with us. We will continue this conversation at Al-Fanar Media, and I invite you to follow our coverage on our website and social platforms, and to watch the recording of this session on our YouTube channel. Thanks a lot for being with us today, and let's meet again in another important topic for the Arab world and the higher education ecosystem at Al-Fanar Media Talks. Thanks a lot, and thanks for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.